Welcome back to a new episode of the Family on Three podcast, where we explore the importance of community, the value of authentic leadership, and what it means to be a good teammate. Today we are joined by Mike Deegan, head men's baseball coach at Denison University, recently published author of the book Let It Rip, wonderful husband, father of four, and a member of the historic baseball program at Marietta College. Today Mike shares his thoughts on a variety of topics, ranging from what he has seen in the corporate world with authentic leadership all the way to what the unicorn teammate looks like. So bring it in, huddle up, Family on Three, Episode 6, Mike Deegan.
Family on three, 1, 2, 3, family!
But no, I appreciate the time, and as I mentioned in the intro, that the pieces of this, this conversation on this show, I'd love to center on is community, the difference between leadership and like truly being authentic and vulnerable leadership, and then obviously my big thing, which is what it means to be a good teammate. But hopping into the community piece of this, I love the idea of the power of a community. I'm a huge believer in it. The idea that the sum is greater than its parts. And, as a coach, your career has put you in the epicenter of understanding the power of community as a college baseball coach. But, before getting into the specifics of coaching and managing a team, I wanted to dabble in the idea of a college community, and the layer upon layer that go into that complex community that makes up a campus. And so with your time at Marietta, obviously as a student athlete and a coach, and now as the head coach at Denison, what are some of the qualities and or similarities or differences that you have seen that make a powerful and impactful community?
Well, first I would say, going back to, if I reflect my Marietta college time, I played for a legend, Don Shally, who was there for 40 years. And he was as big as anybody in college baseball, any level. And he used to always say that he has a love affair. This was his quote: "I have a love affair with the community of Marietta." And so that when I hear that, I'm not going to answer that question directly, but that reminded me just how, and for him, it was the college, obviously, but it was the whole community and the whole town. And I think that's where things get transformational, is when you merge the community, the campus community, with the greater area. At Marietta, it was in the Marietta community. At Denison, it would be the Granville community in Newark. But I think what you see is just a collection of people that strive to serve. And so on a college campus, the faculty are always trying to learn and improve so they can enhance the education of the students. The coaches are obsessed about providing the best education they can in their specific sport. And then administration, they're always thinking about what's next and how can we keep this thing moving and how can this be special. So that's kind of a broad sense. Now, I will say this: when I got to Denison, so I came from Marietta, strong community, and I get to Denison, and I think, like a lot of ambitious coaches, I thought I could will my way into the success I wanted. And I'm using the word I because I'm not proud of that, but it was like, all right, how can I move this thing forward? And I quickly learned that if you're going to establish anything great, you need that community. You need to have relationships with admissions and financial aid, and real relationships, not fake or phony, not trying to manipulate, but relationships. And then those relationships in that community enhance everything. So, in a leadership position, whether it's a coach, a teacher, CEO, whatever, if you're not intentional about growing and building authentic relationships within your respective community, there's no way I think your organization can be as successful as it can be, and nor will be as fun as it can be either. And I think that's important too. Without those relationships, it's not a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think it's an awesome point, in that last piece about the fun part. But talking about, and I was an assistant full-time at Denison when you came on, and I remember some of the conversations, which, I mean, it's crazy that this is so long ago, but those conversations about, I've had the opportunity to, like you said, to be an assistant coach alongside a legend in the lacrosse world. And, even to this day, I think he would talk about still navigating the waters and figuring out how the collective community helps, move us forward. But when you looked at, Marietta is synonymous with success at the highest level. And I would say in all of college baseball. I wouldn't just say in Division III baseball. It's like, it's like Mount Union in football. Everybody in the baseball world knows Marietta, and everybody outside of the baseball world has heard of Marietta College baseball. So when you're going from being an assistant there, having been a player there, having, won national championships, you're coming with an opportunity to look at, I'm going to guess, a good number of head coaching positions with that background and the mentor that you had. What was it about the Denison community that made you think, yeah, this is the spot? Again, as an assistant coach, I get the idea of there are tons of jobs that come open, but what people I don't think really realize is when you do your due diligence, you're really looking at, is this a place I want to lead, that I can lead, that wants me to lead, and meshing all of those things. What was it about Denison that made you say, like, yes, this is the community and the program that I want to lead?
Well, I think first, you have to find a place that aligns with your values. And for me personally, I'm not a good salesman, and I would not be a person who could sell if I didn't believe in a product. And so I had a few opportunities that I just didn't really believe in the product at large. And there was no offense to those schools, because those schools are fine, and they, like, for the right person, that's good. But in my heart, like, I want to be able to sit across, and we go into this deeper, but recruiting is kind of lifeblood of a program, and I wanted to make sure I could sit across from a family and with my full heart and soul be able to say, I really think this is a good opportunity for you to consider, right? We're at the point where we don't really talk kids into coming anymore, but I just want to feel good about presenting our university in the best light. So I think that was the first thing. So I looked at Denison and I thought, okay, there's the academic component that's here. Selfishly, from a family standpoint, it's a beautiful community to raise a family. And then you looked around, and the competitor in me goes, okay, we have a lacrosse program that's really successful. We have a swim and dive program that's really successful. We have multiple sports that are really good. And Denison baseball to me was a little bit of I don't want to say a sleeping giant, but it was, we went 2011, we won 47-4, I think, at Marietta, and won a national championship. And one of our losses was at Denison. And, they won like 10 games that year, but there was talent. And so I really felt like with a little guidance and a little direction, and the fact, most importantly, that it aligned with myself and my values, I felt like this could be a really, really good fit. And so all those reasons combined is why I believe that this would be a good job for myself and my family.
And you referenced the recruiting aspect and the relationship piece and the idea of, and I think part of this also comes from being a young assistant with no family to being a head coach or even an assistant coach with kids of your own. Like, the way you look at, what I want my kid to play for this program, your perspective changed a little bit. And I think it's cool to talk about the values piece and not having to sell, but more it's like, I'm excited to give you an opportunity. And I think that when you step back from that, from, college sports, but you look at just the business world as a whole, some of the most successful companies have created cultures like that, where it's this idea of, like, we're excited to give you the opportunity to come and work here. And I know that your work over the last few years, you've started to add this element of leadership training to your resume and working as a leadership coach and working with businesses and leadership teams. And I wonder, like, in those conversations, as that work has grown, and you've had more and more exposure to, diverse roles and definitions of leadership outside of college coaching, what are some of the qualities that you've seen come to the forefront when it comes to, these are what you have seen in engaged leaders and company cultures that get it, for lack of a better phrase?
Yeah, I think I'll start, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I think that the lead of the elite, the tops of the top, or I should say, the people that I want to be around. So that's maybe a little biased. One, that the leaders in the culture, they have a very strong understanding of exactly who they are. Their self-awareness is through the roof, and I think I say that, and I know that sounds like a soft skill, but when you're in a leadership position, you're gonna get knocked around. Like there's you're opening yourself up to a lot of criticism. You're gonna be doing that with this podcast, by the way, right? You're putting yourself out there, so there's criticism. And if you don't have a strong foundation of who you are, you're just gonna get bounced around and ping-ponged around. And so they know who they are. That doesn't mean that they're not going to work on their flaws and things like that. But they know who they are. I think that's the first thing. It starts there. The second piece is the empathy. And I think why you see a lot of leaders that maybe started in the basement floor as an intern and worked their way up is because they know what it's like to work in different roles. Now, I'm not saying that's necessary for everybody. Some people possess a little higher emotional intelligence, and they expedite that process a little bit. But there's an empathy piece where they truly value that person on the cutting room floor, or the person who delivers the mail. They really, really value that person, and not just with superficial words. They see it, and they realize that everybody who's a part of that organization, their role is pivotal in the success of the entire operation. So I think that's a second thing. The third, I would say, and we've had a lot of interviews over the last month with leaders, and the one thing that has jumped to me is their passion. And I don't always love using that word, because I think it's thrown out there, but you will see this just this force, this energy from those people who are that are working and living and driving in their sweet spot. And it can be, if you're not aligned with that, they almost will come off obnoxious sometimes, or over the top, because they have this drive that others don't possess. And I think the more I do this, Adam, I really believe that is almost a prerequisite for high achievement, because what you'll see from those people then is an ability to work extremely long hours, challenging hours, and go. Now that work may look different. That work is no longer maybe having to get into the office at 6 a.m. and leaving at 6 at night. But those they never stop. They're constantly thinking about, how can I improve this operation? And if you don't love that, like I used to hear coaches, they would like break down their hourly wage, and I'd say, yeah, I'm not. You're maybe not in the right thing then, because it can't be about that. But that work ethic, that passion matches, and I think all those things combined. And I know it's a very simplistic thing, but I see a really high self-awareness. I see a great ability to empathize, and I see that passion, which leads to competitiveness and all those things. But those are the people that I'm most attracted to, and I think it's been a common theme over the great leaders that I've witnessed.
No, that's awesome. I think that, there's so many pieces to that answer that we can kind of dive into, and two that come out to me. The first is how have you taken, every business book out there and every sports book out there, I feel like is starting to merge together, and we're starting to recognize that, a team is a team, and it just looks different if it's wearing a suit and tie versus, a hoodie and sweatpants on a sideline, but it's still fundamentally the same thing. And which is what I get into in the last piece about being a good teammate. But for you, as you've had exposure to these, let's say, corporate leaders, what are some elements of that you've been able to pick and say, okay, like this is a tool or this is a trait that's going to help move my Denison baseball program forward?
I would say a lot of it for me, and this doesn't mean to be, I don't mean to be arrogant, but I think it's reinforcing. I think that's probably the best thing for me is just reinforcing that we're on the right track. And that maybe goes back to my first point of a leader, of that self-awareness, and getting knocked around. I think early on I would get knocked around, and because other people's opinions mattered a lot to me, and it affected my self-esteem, which it can't, right? Like, and so I would say the fact that I think I had a pretty strong understanding of my values, but I don't know if I had the confidence to live those values as strongly as you need to in a leadership position. And I think having conversations with people and being in a relationship with those people where you go, okay, they have some of the same insecurities that I do. They have some of the same issues that I have. Now I've got to have some more conviction in with what we believe in and what I believe in as a leader. So I think it's more kind of enhancing. I think it's more, I guess when you asked it, I was a little off guard, but I think the other thing I would say is the vulnerability piece. I think that's one area that I've changed a lot, is just saying, like, I don't know the answer, or hey guys, you know what, my kids are having a rough day. I had a tough day at work and we have to practice, and I'm just really looking forward to having a great practice today, like having that conversation.
Yep.
Or I'll say to them now, guys, I don't know what it is, I'm nervous, but this game, like, I don't feel right, like I'm a little bit off today. Don't pay attention to my body language because I'm off. So try to pick me up, you know? So, but what
Right.
I've found is that our players respond much better to that than me, you know, say 5 years ago, where you're just kicking a bucket or angry, or, you know, coach is in a bad mood today. I just name it. So I think, like, those are the things, like, because I'm a little more comfortable in my own skin, I've had these conversations, I'm able to embrace myself a little bit more, which I think it really helps my leadership ability.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love the honesty piece with the players. I think I obviously coaching similar age guys and at the same college, I've found that guys are so receptive to that because there's the human element that I think for generations wasn't there. It was the, I'll run through a brick wall for this guy and whatever he says. And I think now, not that buy-in has changed, but I think pieces of what gets that buy-in has changed with this generation of athlete. And I like the idea that you're talking about of being able to just say to them, look, like, I'm off today, or, again, I got 2 kids at home that are sick. I was up, all night. Like, I'm going to be dragging. I need you to pick me up. I think they appreciate that a lot. But one thing you talked about with in talking about the corporate side and the leaders that have that empathetic quality and that genuine understanding and respect for everybody top down.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about the guy that, the classic story of going from the mailroom to the C-suite. One of the things in our line of work, and now really in your line of work as a head coach, and I see it from the other side of the coin, is managing young assistant coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And having that balance with them as a leader in developing their long-term skill, because, we all know an assistant coach's dream is to be a head coach, which means part of your job is to develop them to leave. This is where it's a lot like parenting. You're preparing your kids to eventually leave, but the short-term goal is, we need to be successful now. And how do you balance that, similar to an executive that's working with a young associate, that the better he does at developing that young associate, the better chance that young associate's going to leave for a promotion somewhere else? How do you look at that relationship with your assistants and your role in helping those guys move forward?
That's a really good question. I would say, first, I think you have to listen in and really understand their goals, because I agree that the majority of people want to go on to be a head coach, but some are okay. Like, some are good in their position. They enjoy. Maybe they have at our level they have another job or another career, but you can still mentor them. So I think what I would say first, I would say the most of our development comes within the program and within the action. So, there's a lot of, you talk a lot about professional development. You hear a lot about that. I think the best way you can develop a professional is to give them a high level experience within your organization. So, we're going to spend most of the time trying to give them tasks that will help our program. Number one, kind of they're not mutually exclusive, but two, while it's growing their skills and ability to be attractive to maybe being a head coach. So like what I would say for me at the point of my career, I really oversee the culture and kind of the direction we're going. And if I'm being honest, I did a poor job this year. I think I got away from some of the things, like my main responsibilities I got away from. And so I kind of I stay there and just make sure, it's grit, gratitude, kaizen, and mudita. Like those are our phrases, and they're living and breathing to us. So I have to make sure those are moving. I say that because our assistant coaches, Coach Ryan Romick, the main one right now, he's driving the program like day to day. So he has a ton of responsibility. He's a head coach. Like he's a head coach. I stay over top to make sure, but he has ownership of pretty much the whole defensive side of the program, so, and he does so much in the recruiting. So he's getting a lot of the skills as a head coach. Like I could talk to any athletic director in the country and say, you need to hire Ryan Romick because of his on task jobs within our program, which are making us better as well. So that's where the majority of that time is going to be spent. Now on the side, and I say on the side, 'cause I would say the same thing in corporations too, by the way, like going to hear a speaker or professional, like they're great, but nothing is like the day-to-day activities. So on the side is trying to listen in and hear like, okay, what would be great for like the next step in their careers. And Kyle Linquist was a few years back, and Kyle has had just such a passion for the game. And he was mentioning going to some infield camp with this young coach who was really good. And I said, he's like, I don't know how we're going to pay for it. I said, well, we'll figure that out. We get him out there. And that became that guy's named Kai Correa. He now is the bench coach at 31 or 32 years old for the San Francisco Giants. And that's Kyle's like main connection. But it all started off of him going out and working a camp. And so you try to place people around other people who are active and passionate about what they're doing. So you got to listen in and try to hear that as well. I want to see those people move on and go on and do great things. So it's how can I help them do that? And it starts with in-house, doing a great smash up job for us, and then sprinkling in ways around it to enhance their network. And the last thing is this, is that I think that I've got to be good. Because if not, like my word's not going to matter to people. So I've got to make sure I'm polished, I'm improving, I'm doing the things that I need to do. So when I make that call, it matters.
Again, having been an assistant now, with a program at a high level and for close to 10 years now, it resonates with me, that idea of giving the tasks of basically, can you give a guy head coach tasks so that you can confidently make the call to an athletic director and say, this is the guy. Like you might have other guys, but this is the guy that if you choose, I can tell you, with unwavering support that you're making the right choice. At the same time, I love that piece of also introducing network. And again, I've always felt building out networks is huge for two reasons. One is you just get to meet cool people. Mm-hmm. And the second is it can also be the great reminder of like, you don't know what you don't know until you meet someone. All of a sudden you're like, man, what they do is awesome. Like I'd actually rather do that and pursue that.
Yeah. I mean, sorry to cut you off. We, like Kyle, for example, Kyle played for us at Marietta, and then he came with me, and Kyle won 2 national championships, played pro ball. And there's a sense of arrogance that comes along with that, like myself included, like you really can't get any better than this. Well, then you go out to the West Coast and you meet some people that are doing some amazing things. They may not have the records, they may not have this, but they're doing some incredible things. And you go, oh my gosh, like I have some I went to Vanderbilt in 2006. We had just won our first national championship, and I went to observe their practice. And after we won a national championship, I went there and I went, "Oh my gosh, that's how I want to run a baseball program. Like that's what I want to do."
Yep.
So yeah, if you don't, and I think sometimes in good programs you can stay in your bubble, and you can, because it works. You have a system. It's tried and true, and that's great. But I still think the ability to go out and see some other things, and it can be various people. There are just so many unique, creative people, and as long as you have that curious mindset, you can find it. But I think there's a little bit of a trap of being in a great program. I do.
Oh, I mean, and I couldn't agree with that more. It's probably the best. It's probably the best thing that I've learned in working with Coach C at Denison is that idea of, like, you're always observing. And you're at a high school game recruiting a kid, and I'll be sitting there like drawing up plays that they run.
Yeah.
And a guy next to me will be asking, like, looking at the sheet, kind of thinking like, well, he's not taking notes on players. I'm like, no, but that was an awesome extra man set they just ran. And to this guy, he's like, you guys are, 18-4 and number 5 in the country. What are you taking notes at a random Ohio high school lacrosse game? I'm like, yeah, it doesn't matter. Like, that was awesome. We're going to borrow that.
Well, that's what, and that's what I found with really high, like, so you go back to the high achieving, high leaders, like when we went to Vanderbilt. Now Vanderbilt has now become like the mecca of, at the time they weren't there yet, but they've won 2 national championships. I mean, everyone knows Vanderbilt baseball. Tim Corbin is probably the most recognized baseball coach in America now. So I would go recruiting prior with like friends and Division I friends and they would never ask me about Marietta. Never would. Not like they didn't. They were, division, like, they didn't. When the first time I walked into and I said, "Coach, nice to meet you." And he said, "I appreciate you coming to observe us today, but we need to be asking you the question. You guys are the ones just want and be humble enough and curious enough to try to find those nuggets."
Yeah, the humility piece is huge. I think that it's interesting, in a sport like lacrosse, which is still, it's the fastest growing sport in America and all this stuff, but it's still in its infancy compared to football, baseball, basketball. We still have, I would say we still have more of that maybe than the big 3 sports, but it's changing. And I think one of the reasons it's changing, to be candid, is the amount of money being put into it at the higher levels is making it more competitive. And the idea of, sharing information is harder now, because it's that idea of, you get, like, guys are losing their jobs if they don't win enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I've seen in the last 5 to 10 years that shift, especially at the highest level, where everything's a little bit more guarded. And that's okay. I get it, obviously. But I think that comes with the hyper competitive, it's the equivalent of, Nick Saban and Ed Ogeron sitting down, like, exchanging how they run their football programs. Like,
exactly.
I don't know if that's happening, but like Belichick and Saban, sure. But if Belichick was the head coach at Clemson, I don't know.
No, you know what's fun? Just to push on that a little bit, because first of all, I agree. We had a conversation recently with someone. They mentioned the All Blacks, from the book Legacy. But they were saying that they willingly share any information that within the league, like whatever you want. But here's why: because that forces them to. By the time I share with you, I have to keep moving and evolving. Yes. Right? Because I'm forcing myself. Okay, so here's the playbook, but now I'm forcing myself to keep growing.
Right.
So
cool.
I never stay stagnant. So I'm not saying how I don't have an intimate look at that. It could be a little bit of, but I think it's a neat. I think it's a neat thought. I mean, it's just like doing your podcast. I mean, you're putting yourself out there and sharing some of the things that are really impactful for you, and competitors can see that. but it also forces you to stay on the razor's edge and stay sharp and listen in. So anyways, I think sharing, the people I'm most impressed with are willing to share, because there's a confidence knowing, number one, that most people aren't willing to do the things that are necessary to make this thing go at a really, really high level. And it also forces you to keep growing and evolving, which is
Absolutely.
critical to major success.
Yeah, and I think that the idea of sharing and being willing to put your ideas and your thoughts and what's allowed you to be successful is, again, I think there's a self-confidence that you have to have, with the idea of, I'm not giving out secrets. Everybody, in a lot of ways with what we do, like, a lot of people can execute this. It's just whether they're willing to or not. I mean, none of us are splitting the atom here. And I don't say that in a derogatory way. But I think that one of the things that I found really cool about your story is, now, you're a coach, you got into the leadership side, and now you're an author with a book out, Let It Rip, which you should go on and buy on Amazon right now. And if you're watching on YouTube, there's a screenshot of it. Perfect plug. I don't get any of the proceeds, but
Appreciate it.
yeah, what you're doing there though, is you're putting it out there. You're saying, like, I've been at Marietta. I've won at the highest levels as a player, as a coach. I've, come to Denison. Denison is, now top 10 team this year, on that trajectory. Here's my story. And with the book, and kind of two levels. First of all, talk a little bit about the the path to this point. Like, when did you know you wanted to take your experience and put it on paper and take the risk of pursuing publishing a book? And all the elements, both kind of internally and externally, that you had to use you had to push through with that.
Yeah, first, I thank you for mentioning, like, saying that the confidence to do it, because I don't know if I always have that confidence. I think that would probably be a weakness of mine. This is more trying to grow and saying, okay, I want to become more confident. I want to become more, have more courage, and because it does to share your thoughts. And a newsletter is kind of where this thing started for me, and then took it to a book. It was really, really hard, but I will say this: sharing my thoughts has greatly exceeded any of the negative side of facing some critics. People saying I try to tell people how to live, because if you actually read what I write, it's 90% of that is just the opposite. It's just things that I'm wrestling with, of trying. Okay, so I'm trying to be a good dad, good husband, and a good coach, and all the messiness that comes along with that. So usually it's just me putting my thoughts on paper. So that's where it started, was with the newsletter. Then I had this big, I would say, 5 years of content, and the natural progression was just to put into a book format. And so it's been a great journey. It won't be the last book I write. Just kind of off of our previous conversation, it forces me to stay sharp, because every week I'm in charge in my mind. It's my own little battle here to find enough content to write something that's meaningful for an audience, that they take something from that. And so, my day-to-day life, I'm always observing and trying to think of things and how this relates to myself, our program, and to others. And a big part that energizes me, I love seeing people on the path to whatever their passion may be. Like, I love it. Like, I'm not very smart, I'm not very talented, but I can see when someone is on their path, and just to give it a push. I just love giving that push. And if a book or writing does that, and I know that's an extremely selfish statement, but it just does so much for me. And so that's why I do it. When I know I've nudged someone in the right direction, and you don't always get that coaching. Like, in coaching, there's an opportunity, but this is just a greater audience to do that with. So it's been a fun ride. It's one that I plan on continuing for the next, however many years, because I've just find so much pleasure and value in it.
Well, and I think it's when you talk about, even when I started the podcast, instantaneously raised my awareness of the people that I have relationships with and the story that I think they can tell that can impact someone else. And you wouldn't be surprised by this, but the number of people that I've reached out to say, hey, I'd love to have you on as a guest, that's reply back to me is, well, why? Like, and it's almost me convincing them, like, this sleeve of, of your life or your experience or what you do or what I know about you, like, there's a whole group of people out there that would love to learn from this. And to your point, just like coaching, there's something energetic about almost, finding that little thing that you're like, hey, let's explore this and see what happens. And it's definitely a cool thing. And to your point too, it does keep you on your toes. Like, content is like, and it's when we first came out and started talking, the idea of like, this came out of filling a void of not having practice and 48 guys and a staff and like those daily interactions that fuel us as coaches. And I think for any good coach or leader, that fuel isn't winning and losing. That fuel is, moving the ball down the field, so to speak, for each individual player, knowing that if you have good enough players, if you keep moving them down there, the success will take care of itself.
Sure.
So no, it's definitely, and the book is an awesome thing. And I think it's awesome from the standpoint of, in the context of what we talked about, the willingness to put yourself out there, to share your thoughts, and also to say, look, this is who I am. These are the experiences I've had. You don't have to agree with them, but if it helps one person be like, oh yeah, this resonates with me, then it's a win.
And if I could add one thing to that too, the one of the writing pieces for me, like the newsletter more than the book, it was recruiting. If they've done their homework, they should have a pretty good idea of where I stand on a lot of things and where our program stands on a lot of things. And that helps, right? That you front load the process, because
sure,
we talked about, it's no longer selling. It's okay. Here's who we are. Here's what our university can offer. Here's what our baseball program is all about. Do you want to come? Like, do you want,
right.
is it something that works for you?
I mean, with that, when you talk about the recruiting piece and sharing that story, like, I think one of the things that has started to evolve in the recruiting world, and I've seen in our sport, I'm sure you've seen it as yours, is there is a greater emphasis being placed on the entire experience, and less just on, this is how many games we won, this is how many trophies we have. Now, some programs, that's the case, and that's okay. We talked about Nick Saban earlier. Kids go there to win and to get to the league. But at the same time, as they say, if the process is terrible, they're not going to get as many good kids. For you at a place like Denison, knowing the community the way I do, a big piece of it is that story and that experience, which actually is a perfect, segue to even what today is. Denison is a place that's in the last couple of years really taken ownership of the holistic experience for students, and a huge emphasis on the mental health aspect of all students. So with us, obviously it's with student athletes. And today Denison Athletics is partnering with Mission 34 in a virtual walk that's raising awareness about mental health. I got to know Mission 34 early on with one of our players, Pete Pitroff, who's a graduating senior, was close with the Bonner family. And I kind of helped him, I joke, with logo design and t-shirts and things like that to get it off the ground. But, this morning I pulled it up and saw that there's something like 60 locations around the world that people are doing a virtual walk to raise awareness for this. And this all started on a tiny little campus in Granville, Ohio. But if you would, take a minute and talk a little bit about the work of Mission 34 and its connection to your program, but also on a kind of an overall scale of how mental health has become a thing that coaches and leaders are far more aware of now than even, a decade ago.
Sure, or even a couple years ago, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
so Sean Bonner was a player of ours, student athlete at Denison, and in couple, it was it'll be 2 years, 2 years ago here next fall. Took his life, and he didn't fit the stereotype of someone that you would think of who would have mental health issues. He was by all accounts widely popular, not just within a baseball program or athletic department. I mean, he was well loved and well received all over campus, and had a great family and a lot of love and support back home. Good athlete, really good looking kid. Just had a lot going for him, and the mental health was an issue. And it ended up with him not being with us anymore. But I think from Sean to Mission 34 to what the Bonner family having the courage to do this, by the way, is amazing. To try to take the ultimate tragedy and turn it into a positive in some way is so admirable. And but it's one of those things. I think especially for males, I know it doesn't just affect males. I'm not saying that, but there's such a macho-ness to being a male that you're not supposed to cry or ever show emotion or any of that. And I think Mission 34 and you just, with us kind of being a little more progressive in our thought process, we're understanding that there is nothing wrong with saying that you're having a bad day, or you're
Well, given the current climate, I've been, my opinion is that as we roll out of quarantine and lockdown, however you want to put it, and we start to find the new normal, that we are going to, mental health is going to be the next piece of challenge that comes out of this. And so given the current climate, the sense of isolation that so many of us are feeling, what are some ways, like one of the things I worry about, and I've talked with high school coaches about this too, is how young coaches are handling this with their players. So you go back in time to your first year at Denison versus now. I don't want to speak for you, but I'm going to guess that, how you handle this is just different. And how you're equipped to handle something like this is just different. For, if you were talking to a young coach out there that are trying to navigate these times with their players, what are some of the strategies that you would talk to those young coaches about using to get through this?
That's an interesting question, because I don't know if I would be the expert on this, or by any means. I would say one-on-one connection if possible. So we went through one-on-ones early, because I think there's nothing more valuable than that, than allowing people the space to talk. And then I would say to try to put your ego and to the side, because I think there's a little bit of, I think early on especially, it was like, how much can we do in this time? Like, if you're not working, if you're not doing this or that, you must not want to get better and you don't have a chance. And I think we have to understand that a stressful environment is not a very good learning environment. So if there's a great deal of stress, and whatever stress that may be, and I think that's what we had to realize with our athletes was, okay, like 1 minute we're playing, next minute we're done, the next day they're back home. And then whatever else comes with that, like that we don't always know, right? Maybe mom and dad are now without a job. Maybe, there's so many things that we don't know. So the ability to just listen in sometimes, and I'm not saying we do the greatest job of that, by the way. I mean, it's tough to have, 40 kids, and you're not going to know everything about everyone, but I think maybe just giving people their space right now in general,
Yep.
I think, and finding ways to connect still. We try to meet once a week, and with more just like a guest so they can hear and listen in with us. We've done some small group stuff as well. But I've tried to get off the high horse of like, send me videos of you hitting or pitching. And if they want to do that, that's great. Like, I don't like, that's good too, by the way, because there's some people just want normal, and that's,
Yep.
and that's to celebrate that as well. But I don't know. We've tried to give messages of inspiration, and not like directly to like COVID, by the way, just like we try to put like just positive people around them, that hopefully motivates them, and then just get out of their way a little bit and let them do what they need to do, handle school, handle the stresses of life, and hopefully they know that we're there for them. And I say hopefully because you don't always know that, but I would just say overall, don't be over the top. This isn't the time to try to get this humongous edge, or to force an edge. Like, you may get one, right?
Yeah.
But don't force it. I don't think it's a time for that.
Yeah, no, I love the one-on-one piece, and the awareness that everybody's situation is different. And I think that, I mean, so much of what we've talked about is summarized, with the word empathy, and having that emotional intelligence. And I think for young, ambitious, I mean, I'll say coaches, but this is the same with business leaders, with anybody. And I think even with parents that professionally have ambition and drive and this and this and this, and now all of a sudden that looks completely different. That ability to step back and recognize, okay, like, how is someone processing this? And even I say as a parent, for me, it's been a huge learning curve with my own kids. My kids are incredibly resilient, and that's been inspiring. But at the same time, we've had tough conversations, about why can't I go to school? Why can't I see my friends? And we try to frame it around serving others, and we're doing this for the greater good. But it's hard. And, I think that young coaches recognizing that, and, being willing to connect, but then just listen. I think so many times kids just want to be heard.
Listen, be a human. I do think that there's a bit of this is also a time, if you're being honest as a parent, we shared a little bit off air, like, just, I think right now you also see, just if that passion level exists within the athlete or the student, and whatever they're doing, because if someone needs forced to improve, to do work, then I just don't think at the levels that, like the collegiate level, like high collegiate level, like, you have to have that desire within you to improve. And if you don't want to do it, then there's probably a good chance that it's just not for you, and maybe there's another passion that's out there. So, I've taken the stance with my own children, my own son, who's like, if he doesn't want to go hit or throw, then that's just fine. Like, that's just fine. Like, it's not going to be me forcing him that's going to do it. And the same thing with a coach. It's not going to be me forcing the guys to go do something. It's going to be, do they love it enough to keep moving forward with it? So to me, it's time, like I said, to be a human, to listen in, and just support.
Yeah. And I think the be a human part is just such a perfect phrase for it. Cause we get so, in everything that we do, again, if you do it at a super high level, you have a tendency of getting that tunnel vision. And sometimes that veers away from just being a human. You get robotic, and that's,
no doubt.
It's part of what makes people who they are at that level. But the last question that I always ask a guest, I'm a huge believer in the idea of just be a good teammate, whether it's with my 3 kids, with our family as their first team that they're on, in their community, in their classroom, our Denison lacrosse players on campus. The idea that, I have my definition of what it means to be a good teammate, and how we all are connected. And I think that the last 6 to 8 weeks has magnified that. We're now teammates with people that we don't know. But, in your experience, and I ask this as you, as a coach, as a husband, as a father, as a guy that I have the utmost respect for, not only you as a person, but also how you go about your business, and you talked about your values. And I love all the stuff that you stand for. So I'm probably also going to love the answer to this question, but how do you finish the sentence? To be a good teammate is
to bring a tremendous amount of passion to adding value to the organization or team or family that you're with. Like it's that value piece, and not because I think we get it mixed up sometimes. Like you don't have to be the star. You don't have to be, the All-American or the 4.0 student or the CEO. But there are ways to bring value to that team, and to be obsessed about trying to figure out what that is. Like, what can I do to make this operation better? And and that also, that also doesn't give the onus to, like, you can't just coast as a teammate. You can't just be happy for others. Like, you have,
right.
Because to be a teammate, someone's got to look at you and go, okay, Adam, you got this. Like, we know when we give this to you, it's done, right? Whether that's carrying the water bottles, whether that's like, it's done, and it's done well. And the amount of people who miss that, because over the years, like when I think back and reflect on my career, the people that are most special to me, we've had some great players and things like that, but it's those just selfless individuals who just did their. Those are the ones that get. Put it this way, they're the ones that get my highest recommendation. Like whenever I get to talk to it, like you're gonna be like, no. There's a kid, I don't mind sharing his name, but his name is Jed Bark, and he played for us for 1 year. Then he became a student coach, and he was so impressive day to day as a manager and then as a student assistant that I couldn't not speak that way about him. So that's a teammate to me. And I'm sorry to be long-winded, but
I love it.
It's a very passionate subject to me because
my biggest thing, and I think it's parenting, I think it's coaching, I think it's running a small business. It's the idea of the accolades don't determine the quality of teammate. And I think that it's insanely short-sighted. I think it's insanely, I'll say it's small-minded to think that, I'm a multi-time All-American, I'm a great teammate. Like, no, you might be a turd and you just happen to be really good at your craft.
Yep.
Some of the guys that, that I look back on, that were the best program guys didn't play a lot. But we wouldn't be who we are without them.
And you get very emotional thinking about them because
they're the best, and they're the guy that, they're the guy you're sticking up for in the office when you're looking at roster cuts.
Yep.
And, I laugh, like, as the assistant coach, sometimes you have to be that, like, you're just hammering that nail with a head coach, explaining, like, and again, like this is like, so me at Denison is like you at Marietta.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, to me, I look at it through the vantage point of, like, what's a program guy to me?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's my core piece. And it's, those guys they're incredible. They're the guys whose weddings you want to go to. They're the guys who you want to see have success.
They're the ones you want to ask their parents how the heck they did it. Like, how did you do it? How'd
you get here?
What's the secret sauce? Like, that's not natural. Like, how? And
100%.
Yeah.
And it's, when people tell you, and, and as parents, people will say to you, like, oh, your kids are great. And, it's, your kids are well behaved. And, like, and that's awesome. And I had a parent, this was a couple years ago. And I don't say this as like my kids are great, because trust me, you can come to my house right now. But I had someone that's like, well, you're just lucky to have nice kids. And I kind of looked at him, I was like, that is not how this works. Like, you have kids, we have 24 hours in the same day. Like, and so when you fast forward to a 22-year-old who is just so respectful, and, you just pray that one of my 3 daughters marries a guy like that. Yeah. You want to look at that parent and be like, what did you do? Like,
I need to know.
right?
Like,
how do I get there?
yeah, it's so special, and I think that's when you have that. That's like the team formation is you have like these eclectic like groups, right?
Yeah, no, that's the cool part about a team.
Yeah,
Like, and
because you can't just have that and win. Like that won't
Right.
win. That won't win
Nope.
at the high. Like you have to have this, and this and this but that, and it's a heck of a lot more fun if you can have it. And if we've all had them. I think Peter's probably pretty darn close to it.
Yep.
Like the star player who's also really special in that regard, and that's when the magic happens.
Yep.
But it's so hard to combine all those things and yeah, I just it's short-sighted. I love when you said short-sighted because you just want to just say, hey, no, like if your kids showing up every day to practice and killing it and they're bringing their best version of themselves every day, like you're doing so much for us. Like don't get bogged down in all this other stuff.
I've had those conversations with parents that, why isn't my kid playing? And it's so hard to convince them of the value and also of at 30,000 feet, them playing or not in a Division III lacrosse game is not going to determine their success 30 years from now. Like they're going to crush it.
They're going to kill it.
All the reasons why they're helping us crush it now that you don't see. You talk about the unicorn player is the combination. Like, yeah. I think, to me, you mentioned Peter, he's as close to a unicorn as you can get. And again, as a coach, the longer you do it, you recognize just how rare that is. And that's what makes, in my opinion, is what makes the great coaches great and the great leaders great are the ones who embrace the fact that those unicorns don't exist a lot and figure out, how do I connect these dots to get the best out of this kid who doesn't have the quality that this kid has, who doesn't have the quality that kid had. Like, how do we move, the train down the tracks? And it's a fun process. And I'll say that you're killing it. You're killing it on your front with that process. And I'm super appreciative of your time. I think your insights and just your experiences and the way you go about your business is something that can be of huge value.
Thanks for him. This means a lot. This was fun. This was really fun. I felt like we were just kind of chopping it up here. So those are always the best. So I really appreciate it. And
yeah, no, I think there's a lot of value that can be taken from this. And I really do look forward to what your program has lying ahead. I think Dennison, no pun intended, hit it out of the park. And selfishly, I'm jazzed that I just get to be a little bit of a spectator for it. So thanks, man. Stay safe.
Appreciate it, man.
Stay sane with those 4 kids running around. And we'll definitely reconnect for a cocktail on the other side of this.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Adam. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Family on 3 podcast. I truly hope you were able to take something away from Mike's conversation today. For me, the few things that really stood out was his talk about self-awareness, the value of joining a community that aligns with your values, and what it means to develop real relationships in order to help move a group forward. I appreciate your time. I hope something was able to help you in your life. We'll see you on the next episode.